Let's podcast as we continue our OG summer break extravaganza. No Gilio today. We've got Jeremy Markovich from the NC Rabbit Hole newsletter hanging out with us in studio. And I could not think of a more appropriate person to talk about on July 3rd, July 4th Eve, about some of the weirdness in North Carolina related to fireworks, gas stations, and monster trucks than you.
Yeah, that's my beat. If that is the beat, like if you know how like when you're a kid, and you're like, I'm going to be an astronaut. And then at some point your dreams are like, well, you know what it actually takes to be one of those? You know how many there actually are? Mm-hmm. And you say, oh man, I'm sorry. It's okay. Whatever. But if you say, hey, you know what? You're going to grow up and you're going to write about monster trucks, fireworks, and gas stations. I'm like, hell yeah. And guess whose dream came true?
For those who might not be familiar with the North Carolina Rabbit Hole newsletter, which is on Substack, what do you hope to accomplish with your newsletter?
I don't really have a goal. I mean, the goal is really, I think this is interesting.
Yeah.
I like to write about it, and I have an obsessive personality where unless I get to the bottom of it, it'll just nag me.
Yeah.
Like, personally.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, let me just if I can get it out there and write about it and get to an answer that I feel like is complete or makes me happy, then I can like cross that off and like put it aside.
Okay. Well, no, I appreciate the newsletter because it does answer questions about things that I've been curious about in the past.
Yeah.
Again, as we celebrate July 4th, I think most of us have some sort of experience of us buying illegal fireworks. Mm-hmm. We're illegal in the state of North Carolina.
Yeah.
For me, growing up in South Florida, where fireworks were quasi-legal, if you wanted the real stuff, you had to leave the state.
Mm-hmm.
And we did summer road trips all the time. And there's this classic old school road trip gas station. They got the real stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the most notable one would be south of the border. That one still stands the test of time. You can still go to Fort Pedro. But if you want some more of the questionable items,
mm-hmm.
you can go to like a mom and pop shop that might have something in the back.
Yeah.
And with the border of North Carolina and South Carolina, there are some businesses that are really, really wise to set up shop just across the border, just like we did with sports wagering.
Mm-hmm.
If you went up to Virginia, just across the border, you were good, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize until I read it in your newsletter that the border between North Carolina and South Carolina was only a hard line in certain areas of the state. There were some areas of the state that it was like quasi, like we're not like, yeah, that's South Carolina. This is North Carolina, but we haven't like put it into the actual mapping of the two states and how we divvy up the counties and the taxes and everything else, right?
Yeah. I mean, like this is one of these things where if I said to you, I'm going to tell you a story about how they drew the line, you're like, I would love to do anything else. But when you read about, it's just a comedy of errors.
Yeah.
So like, the instructions basically were go like find a point, I think like 30 miles to the east of the mouth of the Cape Fear River, draw a diagonal line, get up to I think the 39th parallel, and then go like basically due west. And that is the line. That's where the border is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they made these instructions in like the 1700s. Things were not as precise as you might think. They actually messed up and didn't get to that line. And so then they just like, well, we'll go west from here. And everybody's like, no, you messed up. And so they had to like, that's why it's, when you look at the border, it's lower on the east side of Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, well, I think to make up for it, why don't we just make it higher over here?
Okay.
Like, we'll just improvise. And so they kind of did that. And then it's higher on the other side, but it's not due west because there's the compasses are thrown off by weird stuff. And then, and the way that they would do it, this is why this comes into play, in recent history, is they would just have a chain.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be like, they take the chain, like, okay, the line's here. And then the border is on that rock over there. Let's put some marks on that rock.
This sounds like my property value at this point, where like in my neighborhood, I know there was an old fence with like a red tag.
Yeah.
That indicates this is where the line is. And it's kind of like, that tree's kind of in my property.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
We had a tree that was like down in a ravine and it was like in a questionable area. And it was like, I think that's my neighbor's, but I don't know. And then it died and they cut it down. It was like, cool.
So this affected this weird quasi border. Let's go ahead and make it up here. Mm-hmm. You take a little bit there. You take a little bit there. There was a gas station in Lake Wiley.
Yeah.
It's a Lake Wylie gas station. For those who are not familiar with Lake Wylie, it's between Gastonia. It's just outside Gastonia.
Yeah, it's like
right?
if you go down south from Gastonia, North Carolina's spiritual capital.
Yeah.
You go down south from Gastonia, and when you hit the line, that is sort of like Lake Wylie, Clover.
Okay, this is like Highway 274, right?
Yeah, 278. Yeah, it's one of those.
It's one of those, right? So this gas station was originally in South Carolina, or at least before the lines were truly drawn.
It was originally in South Carolina. This is where I have to. I'm going to make this as not painful as possible. It was in South Carolina. The advantage to being in South Carolina is you get to sell relatively cheaper gas because the gas taxes are lower, and you get to sell fireworks.
Bingo.
So gas and fireworks. And so
who does it? Like, if that doesn't say America, I don't know what does.
I know. I mean, you just go in there with your just flag hanging out the window, and you're waving it, and you're like, give me all that.
Give me a tall boy, fireworks, and some gas. Let's go.
So fireworks and gas just seems like a thing. Like don't. I mean, you could buy Black and Miles in there too.
This gas station back in the day was making some bank around at that time of the year.
Anywhere on the South Carolina line, they just mush up all of the vice kind of up against the line, and that like the liquor store, like in South Carolina, the liquor stores are not state run,
right?
So you can go to like the Charlotte. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Frugal McDougal's and get a deal because it's just right. You can see it right from 77 as you're driving down there.
Yeah.
In fact, there's another one down there that's run by a former sports guy, Sauce Monkey Spirits.
I've not heard of it.
Chuck Howard, who used to be on WCNC.
Oh,
he runs that. That's
okay.
his
I know the
now.
name. I didn't realize he was running a liquor store.
Very dumb, quick aside.
Okay.
My first job in North Carolina I was the overnight producer at WCNC in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And Chuck was the sports guy. And they used to do a thing where they would like tape the sports report, and they would air it in the morning, and so after 11 o'clock news, like, hey, Chuck, go out there, give me like 3 minutes of sports. And then they give you the tape and they say, here's the intro. Now here's Chuck with what's up with the Panthers and something with the Charlotte Knights and whatever.
Sure.
And, I'm like a 25-year-old, kid. I got like 2 hours of news that I have to write by myself in the middle of the night. I'm like, cool, that sounds good to me. Just whatever. It's the thing I care about the least.
Mm-hmm.
And so they popped the tape in one morning and Chuck's going through it. And in the middle of it, he's like, the numbers are, the contract's up like 250,000. Ah, shit. All right, let's try it again. And like literally everybody's eyes just was like, oh no, oh God. And so I said like, dump out. And then the anchor just goes, sorry about that, folks. And we just went on with our day.
That's what happens in the business.
I said, hey, be ready. We're going to get calls. 5:51 in the morning. Nobody called. We were third place station. Nobody's calling.
So anytime that's happened to me on the radio where somebody had cursed, I mean, like one time, like Torrey Holt, notorious for being a guest and then just forgetting he's on radio and he'll curse.
Yeah.
And every time that happened, like dump. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go with the calls. People just laughed.
Yeah.
People were fine.
People were fine with it, except Chuck, they let him go over that.
Over that?
Oh, geez. I don't think that was the only thing.
That's not the reason why.
That wasn't the reason why. But and I felt awful because I'm like, oh God, I should have caught it and whatever. And everybody's like, no, you don't beat yourself up, whatever. And that sort of thing. I went to some party. Chuck was there, and I was still feeling a little bad about it. And then like Chuck stands up and sees me coming in, and he's like, hey, there's a fucker that got me fired. And I was like, oh no. And he's, no, it's cool. We're going to play golf. You can come on my boat. It's fine. We never played golf when I was boat, but it was like, fine. And then his like last email to like the whole newsroom as he was like leaving was like, hey man, I'm out of here. But like, you can catch me at my new email address, like saucemonkey something at whatever.com. And now he has Sauce Monkey Spirits.
Now
so
I know
if this
podcast doesn't work out, I'll just go down to South Carolina, open up a liquor store.
That's right, man.
That's the way to go. With fireworks.
There's fireworks. Liquor store with fireworks.
Liquor with fireworks. Who says no?
Yeah.
So this gas station, which you've been to,
yes,
was then repurposed. So they got stripped of their South Carolina status?
Well, so what happened was they resurveyed the line. So if you talk to engineers, what they did was there was where the line is supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And they combed through like old records from like the courthouses or whatever. And so the line is not actually straight. It's supposed to be straight, but they did their best impression of where the line is supposed to be based on the information they could find.
Okay.
So it is still not like exactly a straight line. It's still slightly zigzags because they had to be true to where the line was supposed to be. You're not allowed to move a state border.
Look, man, if I owned this gas station, I would have gone thirsty beaver on that thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can put the border around my gas station. I am not giving up on this payday that is fireworks.
Yeah.
Come on now.
So they were pissed. And so but what they said was, hey, there's got to be some recourse. So the state lawmakers down the road here passed a law that said anybody affected by this move can basically pretend like they are still in another state.
Okay.
So, and you can't write a law, as being like, you know what, Joe Ovies is exempt from all parking laws, like you particularly. But they could say like anybody with glasses and a beard and like wearing a Crooked Crab Brewing t-shirt is exempt from law. So it's like, you're not exempting, you're exempting a class of people, but sometimes it just affects one person.
Sure.
So they're like, any gas station that maybe was affected by this can just sell gas at the lower rate, and we'll only charge like the South Carolina rate. And that was just one of them. And so they can still do it. Now, if they sell it, then the next guy can't do that. But like they're allowed to do it. So it is the anomaly in North Carolina. If you want to get cheaper gas in this one particular place,
one gas station,
and this is like the dumbest thing of all about all of this, other than I actually can't do fireworks anymore. That's one thing.
That's completely out of there.
But they never moved like the signs. So like if you drive down there today, it's still like they're just like they did all this work and they never moved the road signs.
Yeah.
So you're just like, oh, look at it. It looks nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay.
And but you can go get your cheap gas.
I don't know. I guess they just didn't have the same kind of pull in South Carolina the way that south of the border did.
Yeah.
As they were able to get actual exits off the highway and also some other things. Although there was one thing that south of the border was not able to control, which affected the entire state, which was video poker.
Yeah.
All of that was to kind of lead up into the whole concept of going across the border and getting fireworks. And of course, south of the border is synonymous with that. We'll discuss the mysteries of south of the border and how much longer it's going to last after Buc-ee's opened up not too far from it after this.
Housekeeping.
And that's brought to you by Enovana. Check them out. Enovana.com. ENOVANA.com.
If you have mess inside your mansion or trash in your cabana, you get it clean with Enovana.
Hey, look, you got the 4th of July. You got people coming through the house. It's going to get dirty. Schedule a one-time cleaning. Check out. See what Enovana is all about. So again, Enovana.com. Big thanks to Breeze Through for sponsoring the Podcast Festival. Yes, the Podcast Festival is taking place on August 24th. No better way to celebrate week 0 of the college football season than hanging out with Shutdown Fullcast. We're going to be there. Hand in the Dirt's going to be in there. And of course, Shutdown Fullcast. We'll have exclusive merch from Home Field. We're very excited about that. And you will have access to the OG hats. And of course, we thank Breeze Through for being the presenting sponsor of our Podcast Festival. Check out breezethrough.com. Get your tickets at the Rialto's website. You can go to eTix as well. Big thanks to Roback for sponsoring Ovies and Giglio. Check them out online, roback.com. Use that promo code OG20 to save 20% off your order. Happy and Hale might be something you would visit after you overdo it with the hot dogs and burgers this weekend, maybe? Just a thought. I know when I came back from Disney, I hit Happy and Hale, and I'm on that smoothie train, a little detox. But look, I'm making Happy and Hale sound like, oh, it's just nothing but healthy food. No. It's clean eating. It's whole foods. It's really, really good, but it's filling and freaking delicious. So head out to Happy and Hale so you can take a break, not just a hockey break, but a break from the burgers and the dogs.
Let's take a break. Let's take a hockey break. Brought to you by Happy and Hale.
We also thank Mosquito Authority and Pest Authority. Check them out, bugsbite.com. You can bundle and save with Mosquito Authority and Pest Authority. Mosquito Authority, pretty self-explanatory. You're hanging out outside like you might be doing this weekend. You don't have to like slather yourself in mosquito spray. Get Mosquito Authority to come out and keep that in check. And of course, with Pest Authority, you can keep the critters in check inside your house. Again, that's bugsbite.com. Hopefully you don't get in any trouble this weekend. But if you do, we got some lawyers. Yeah, check them out. WH.lawyer. That's Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law. And of course, our friends over at Hometown Realty. There's a lot of new construction going up right now. Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Cary, Apex, the surrounding areas, all that stuff. It is a whole new ball game out there. And you want to buy with confidence. You want to know what the incentives are for some of these builders. Hometown Realty's got access to that. So check them out, myhtr.com. Again, that's myhtr.com. How often do you road trip down 95?
Not as much as I used to.
Okay.
I kind of hit the lower part. I don't really hit the upper part until I get to like Richmond.
See, my relationship with I-95 is long and complicated for a variety of reasons. Growing up, my dad was all about the road trip. And to get out of South Florida, out of the state of Florida, in and of itself is a 7-hour, 6-hour extravaganza, depending on traffic, right? And we'd always go up to various areas to visit family or old, like, war-related stuff up here that my dad was fascinated by. So from a young age, I remember south of the border being this kind of like weird oasis in the middle of nothingness on I-95. And when I moved here in 1995, south of the border was kind of like a marker for me, a visual marker of where exactly I was. Oh, okay. I see the sombrero. I'm about 90 minutes to 2 hours from home. Got it. Cool. And of course, the signs keep you occupied. You know, if you didn't have a Game Boy, you're listening to a Walkman or whatever, the signs all up and down. The signs were problematic back in the day, which we can get into. But those were all things that would keep you occupied on 95. But every time I would make a trip, I would always notice, man, this place looks worse. Man, this place looks worse. It's always looked like just decrepit as long as I can remember. And it's only getting worse. And now with the opening of Buc-ee's down in South Carolina, I feel like anybody that would stop there for cheap gas and a clean bathroom is just going to drive the additional 15, 20 minutes to get down to the Buc-ee's and have your Buc-ee's experience, right? And I thought to myself, well, what is the role of south of the border going forward now that gas is expensive, but mileage is a lot greater. People fly more. You took a train to get from where you are to downtown Raleigh, all that kind of stuff, right? What is the role? And the only thing that I could still think of was fireworks. Yeah, that's it. Is you just go to Fort Pedro and you get your fireworks. And what I did not realize about south of the border, because again, every time I go there, I'm like, what is the deal with this place? How are you still getting away with the Pedro statue and everything else in the era that we live in? And a lot of it comes down to the family that still runs it, that has kind of stuck to its guns with a couple of different things, and also pointing to, you see, you view us as cheap gas, you view us as fireworks, but let me tell you about some of the stuff we had to do back in the day, like a safe haven for people to travel that might be from marginalized communities. Was it Ryan Schaefer, who I believe was the guy who started south of the border back in the 40s or the 50s or whatever it was very adamant about how, hey man, I stood up to the Ku Klux Klan, all this other kind of stuff, right? And I was like, okay, what else is going on here? What's up with the honeymoon suites and things like this? And I did not realize that at one point in time, South Carolina had relaxed marriage laws. Did you know this?
I did not.
Dillon, South Carolina, which is the town just outside of south of the border, was considered at one point in time the marriage capital of the East. It was kind of like a Vegas of the East. If you wanted to go and elope, you would go to Dillon, where the marriage laws, I believe, were as young as 14. You get married, and then they had honeymoon suites at south of the border, and that's where you'd spend the night. I always wondered, like, why the hell does south of the border have honeymoon suites?
Why would
Who's coming here for a honeymoon?
Yes.
Well, that's why. The NNO, the News and Observer, recently did a story about Dillon. Again, that was described as the wedding capital of the East, basically our Las Vegas. And the other thing that I also found interesting about the honeymoon suites and everything else was that people would go back as like a getaway. You know, like, hey, because also the liquor laws in South Carolina were different too. Yeah. So people would go and kind of use it as a home base because, again, right across the border, and all that kind of stuff sustained itself. So there's all sorts of like weird, interesting history to south of the border that I was not aware of.
Yeah. I think this is like one of these ongoing questions about like how far can nostalgia pull you until you're like, you know what, actually it doesn't, I don't, okay, I'm done with this, so it's like everybody I think has fond memories of that being like at least a marker. I don't know if it's fond for like everybody, but like you're very aware of south of the border. Like it's one of those places that, there are just billboards.
Yeah, it's all
everywhere.
billboards.
And you see it for like 100 miles and like, and you get there. It's kind of like the, to a lesser degree, like the JR outlet that's on like 40.
Yes.
Or when I was a kid, we went through South Dakota and we saw for 200 miles like wall drug. Where we are going in there. We went in there. Like, you know what there is? It's a warehouse of knickknacks.
It's just trinkets, man.
It's just it.
It's just trinkets.
And it's like you see this and you're like, what is this? And then it has to sort of live up to it. And over time, it kind of goes away. And you're left with like, okay, what's the practical reason I'm coming here? Like, okay, I will actually stop and look around and be like, look at this place and get my fireworks and move on versus like actually like making it like a rite of passage that has any meaning.
So I mistakenly spoken. Ryan Schaefer is the grandson who's been recently quoted in the Washington Post about some matters related. I think the last time he spoke to the Washington Post was like in 2016, 2017. It was Alan Schaefer, who in 1949 decided to make south of the border. It wasn't south of the border in 1949. It was essentially I'm a beer distributor. Let me open up a gas station that has quick access to sell beer because, again, different laws like we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
And then that kind of grew into south of the border after he made a trip down to Mexico and he saw all the stands and the people selling trinkets and he was kind of fascinated by the culture. And there you go. In 1993, the Mexican embassy wrote like an angry nastygram to south of the border saying, hey, guys, this is some pretty racist shit. Maybe you don't want to do that because that was related to the billboards.
Yeah.
Growing up, I remember the billboards being like, you never sausage a place. You're always a wiener at Pedro's. Hot today, chili tamale. It's all these really bad kind of ethnic puns.
Yeah.
Apparently, after that 1993 letter that got a lot of headlines, they decided to change it. Because I always wondered, like, why the signs used to be more clever. They used to be funnier.
Yeah.
They had like actual money into them. Because remember, the sausage actually had like an image of a sausage, like an actual 3D,
like gigantic.
Yeah. It was probably a gas container that they painted orange to make it look like a sausage. Your sheep are always counted at Pedro's. That sign still exists on the property. I think they preserved it for like historical purposes.
Yeah.
But the rest of them are just kind of like bad pun, like even worse, more generic puns now.
Yeah.
All that's related back to 1993. It was Ryan Schaefer in a Washington Post article that kind of pushed back on the trinkets and the imagery and everything else. He told the Washington Post, look, man, all we're doing is selling iconography that is already available in Mexico. It's like, we didn't invent Pedro. We didn't invent that character. Even the what they complain about the most, Pedro sleeping beside a cactus, I can still go to Mexico today. I go 4 times a year. That's something they sell everywhere because they're selling it to tourists.
Yeah.
Right. So they're just like, we're just doing the same thing.
It's kind of like the reverse thing where it's like if you go to like St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, and people are like, this used to be quiet, and the only Americans came over like, what are y'all doing? How are we raging for St. Patrick's Day? And we're like, oh, I guess we should like do the thing that everybody expects us to do.
Yes.
So it's a little bit self-serving.
A little bit. You mentioned wall drug and you mentioned going out to the West. And I think this is probably why I hope south of the border never gets bulldozed, that it always remains, or at least something is there, right? Is because it's probably the closest thing we have on the East Coast to those roadside, those just decrepit, falling apart roadside attractions out on the West. Every time the family and I have done some sort of West Coast trip to knock off some national parks, right? You're driving through nothingness oftentimes, and you could see remnants of what once was road trips of the time.
Yeah.
60s and 70s and 80s. And as car technology has gotten better and you don't have to stop as often, those things just kind of fell to the wayside. You see this on I-95 and I-40. All those hotels that used to pop up every so often, on the borders and everything else, they've all kind of gone out of business because you don't have to stay overnight in Florence, South Carolina while you're doing a road trip because your car, man, you get a hell of a lot more gas mileage now, right? Or people are flying and things like that. So south of the border is just kind of like this one piece of like lost America, in my opinion, that when you get rid of that stuff, you bulldoze it, you almost kind of lose some character. America doesn't have ruins, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But for America, the best thing you could say is ruins of old commercialization. We don't have the Colosseum. We don't have Greece. We don't have any of that stuff, right? But what we do have is cheap commercial products that sold you shit back in the day and failed endeavors in commercialism. Like, for instance, one of the things that was supposed to save south of the border or change the nature of south of the border was video poker. Video poker was big in the 90s in South Carolina, and they had opened up this Silver Slipper arcade that now just sits there. I don't even know what's in that building anymore. I don't even want to go in that building. You know? But I think in like it was either late 99 or 2000. I think there were 34,000. If I had the stat correct, let me go back and look this up because I jotted it down.
Yeah.
For the video poker thing. But it was in 1999. The South Carolina Supreme Court ruled that 34,000 video poker machines had to be unplugged. And that included what happened at south of the border. Apparently, this is something for you to check out, maybe for another NC Rabbit Hole newsletter. I did not realize there's some ruins, if you will, just outside of Blacksburg, South Carolina. That's just outside, Kings Mountain, west of Charlotte?
Yeah.
And it was this place called Castle. And it was built to look like a castle. And it was Castle Arcade and video poker. And now it just kind of sits there decrepit.
Yeah.
Like an old ruin of commercialism.
Yeah. There's an amazing amount of stuff that I think, especially when you cross the line. I think like I don't know if I've seen that particular one.
Yeah.
But like everybody would build some gaudy thing that you would have to like crane you could not look at it when you're driving down the road, and then all these places went out of business, and then they're just still there, and you're like, why is there a gigantic castle right inside the state line? And you're like, what is the deal with that? Like, who would have gone to that place?
I just came back from Orlando, and Orlando has completely changed over in the last 10 to 15 years. In my own weird warped sense of what things used to be, reminders of what used to be. Orlando, in the wild and woolly days of early Walt Disney World, where they didn't have 4 different parks with multiple resorts and Disney Springs and all these other things to do. I mean, it was a resort capital, don't get me wrong, but it didn't have enough in Walt Disney World for you to do an entire week. So they got smart. You go on International Drive. There's all sorts of hotels, putt-putt spots. They had all these other kind of weird theme parks that tried to compete. There was, what was it called? Like you had your medieval times type things that would open up. Like, hey, you're not going to the park today, but come see our dinner show. They tried to open up it was called like Visions of China, which was like a strange theme park cultural spot.
Yeah,
that went out of business, and it was bought by a church that then turned it into the middle, like the Holy Land. I think it was called the Holy Land Experience. And it was supposed to give you this idea of Jerusalem and everything else. That went out of business. This whole Crossroads area that had like Red Lobsters and putt-putts, that all got bulldozed when I was just down there. And there's these old resorts that have just kind of fallen into disrepair. And the other one that I remember vividly, and I wish it was still kind of up, was something called Baseball and Boardwalks, or Boardwalks and Baseball. And this was to tie together, you're going down for spring training to go see the Cardinals or the Mets or whoever it is. Well, while you're checking out these baseball games for the kiddos, we're going to open up a roller coaster and carnival games and all this other stuff. Of course, nobody went to it.
Yeah.
So those wooden roller coaster just kind of fell apart. So it's those types of things that I wish were still around as kind of like hey, this is how things used to be. And that's why I'm so fascinated by south of the border, because it is a tie to how things used to be back in the day while you got your big glitzy Buc-ee's just down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you saying that made me think of this is another thing that is just across the border in South Carolina.
Yeah,
but the whole PTL campus that was in Fort Mill.
Okay,
so Jim and Tammy Faye Baker.
Oh right, okay.
Opened a like Heritage USA theme park, and it was like there's this gigantic tower, and there's rides, and there's like this wave pool, and all this other stuff. And then it's in Fort Mill, which is right across the border. And there's a very famous, you can like Google it. There's a very famous picture of Jerry Falwell in a full suit going down a water slide. Like that's at that place. It's fantastic.
Oh man, like but
like it died. Like it's the whole thing.
It just died.
It just went away. I mean, well, it died because of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker kind of were into some stuff, but like it went away, and like it slowly kind of disappeared, except for this gigantic tower that was there, and it was like looming over this regular neighborhood. They were just building around it, and they're like, "What are we gonna do with this big thing that bricks are falling off of?" and I think they finally figured something out. But it's like all of this stuff that I think you're saying. It's like these big ideas. I think it's like everything down there is what you're saying is like this bet on the future.
It's a huge bet.
You're like,
huge bet.
It's like you know what's going to be big today? Plastics, and then you just bet on that. And it's like, what if we could have this? This is like a very American idea. What if you could have a baseball, but also roller coasters? And we're like, what if you could have fireworks, but also like during the football game, like attached to your helmet, like what if like nothing is ever kind of quite good enough on its merits. No. It's like, what if, but like the idea is not like, let's make it more compelling or make it more actually interesting, or like let's improve it in an actual like tangible way. It's like, no, put fireworks on it. Let's blow it up, and then people will come. And you're like,
You're
for a minute.
You're describing Action Park up in New Jersey.
Oh yeah.
Oh, did you watch that documentary on HBO?
No, I didn't see it.
I highly recommend, because I never went to Action Park. Gilio would go to Action Park, Jersey guy. And I remember as a kid, MTV did like Headbangers Ball from Action Park. They were talking to Alice in Chains or something like that. And I'm like, whoa. There's like a water slide with a loop, and then people would get stuck in it. It's just, like you said, the American ideal of this is cool, but what if we did this and added elements of danger? And hey, we've got a beer garden right next to these speedboats. Let's put them together. That is so American. And then it has its moment. Safety becomes a problem.
Yeah.
They shut it down. And now it's like there's a ski resort that's taken over, and there's like some weird elements of Action Park that are still there, and you kind of miss it. And that and this will tie to what we'll close the conversation with. You kind of see this now when you go to the Outer Banks too.
Yeah.
When 264 opened up, it completely derailed all the little stops along the way. Now, I'm guessing Manio probably doesn't complain about this, because Manio can go back to being a little bit more of a quiet town.
Which is what they want.
That's what they want.
They really want that. They wish you would kind of halfway ignore them.
But there was a time where you had to drive through Manio to get to Nag's Head, and then your access to the actual Outer Banks. But now with 264, man, you bypass all that stuff. You don't go through those little towns anymore.
Yeah. And
you kind of miss those little slices of Americana while you do it, which is kind of a bummer. Also, that you can get in and out of your rental quicker. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not scoffing at the convenience of this all, because it's much easier to get down to the Outer Banks in 3.5 hours than it was 4.5 to maybe 5 hours, depending how things work and on traffic.
Like nobody's like nostalgic for like longer in the car. You're nostalgic for like the stop, but you're not like, man, I wish I could make this drive in like 8 hours.
No. You want to do it in 3.5, which gets us to the time in the Outer Banks that I visited an iconic monster truck.
Oh yeah.
Next. Big thanks to the Butcher's Market. It's 4th of July weekend. You're grilling out. It's not too late to head out over to the Butcher's Market and get some pre-made burgers, the signature steak tips. You can never go wrong with those. Or if you're looking for something a little bit more engaged, you got some time this weekend, hey, you can go to that meat case. You can find yourself a big old slab of pork and try to make some barbecue with it, right? I don't know. Maybe you got inspired by going to Longleaf Swine, right? So you go to thebutchersmarkets.com to go get the stuff that you need, because you were inspired by the brisket or the barbecue or any other things that you had at Longleaf Swine. And again, I can't stress this enough. You know about the barbecue. You know about the brisket. The Longleaf and the brunch, don't sleep on the brunch. The brunch is off the charts delicious. The burrito, whew, so good. So head on over to longleafswine.com. Big thanks to Matt Davis over at State Farm. Check him out online, theoginsurance.com. InsureGarner.com, or call them directly, an actual human on the other end of the line, 919-779-8277. Two Roosters, another corporate champion that we're big fans of this time of the year. It's hot. You want to get out of the house? Keep the kids happy? Ice cream. That keeps everybody happy. TwoRoosters.com. That way you can find out what their rotating flavors are to go along with all the core flavors. Cannot wait to find out what Gilio is obsessed with from here on out. Also, big thanks to Nature's Relief Hemp Store. You can check them out online at naturesreliefhempstore.com, RELEAF.com. You've got questions, you've got some uncertainties, you want to know what it is you're buying? Nature's Relief has those answers for you. Everything from pre-rolls to seltzers to new batteries, cartridges, etc. They've got it at Nature's Relief. So we appreciate them sponsoring Ovies and Gilio. And of course, Crank Arm. No Hey Joe today, but Crank Arm Brewing always there for us. Check them out online at crankarmbrewing.com. We got our OG Summer Jam coming up on July 28th. It's going to be at Crank Arm. We're going to have some food. Thanks to our friends at the Butcher's Market. It's just it's a general hang. We're going to have a good time. So big thanks to crankarmbrewing.com. You have kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Did your kids go through a monster truck phase?
No, they went through like a Lightning McQueen phase.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
they went through like a trucks. But I recently went through a monster truck phase just like as an adult because I watched the third season of Righteous Gemstones.
Right.
And every time they get the monster truck out and they play that song,
yes.
The Redeemer, and it's the Redeemer. And then like I love it. Like there was some level of like knowing what people want.
Mm-hmm.
And so in like at least 2 episodes, they pause the entire plot just so they could get the monster truck out and just wreck shit with it. They're driving over and blowing it up. And I was sitting on the couch next to my wife watching this, and I was squealing with delight. I was like wiggling on the couch because I'm like, this is so great. This is so wonderful.
So the kids, both kids, they're 16 and 13 now, but they went through a monster truck phase. So we bought all the little Hot Wheels monster trucks, and their favorite was like Maximum Destruction, Monster Mutt, El Toro Loco, and of course the iconic Grave Digger.
No Bigfoot?
No Bigfoot. You gotta remember, the monster truck crew, Bigfoot was like its own separate thing. Bigfoot's more you and me.
Yeah.
We're of the age for Bigfoot.
Bigfoot's like 80s, like Hulk Hogan era kind of stuff.
But again, because I'm a weirdo and I deep dive into these things, much like you come to find out that the people who run Bigfoot had like some sort of falling out with the monster truck tour, which is its own entity.
And they can't crack the industry.
So the family that owns a collection of these monster trucks, including Gravedigger, is a guy by the name of Dennis Anderson. I think his kid is now driving that truck.
Ryan, I think is his name. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Dennis Anderson is like a legend in the monster truck stuff. I did not realize they were based out of Grandy, North Carolina, which is just north of the Outer Banks.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went up to go visit my brother-in-law, who lived in Kill Devil Hills for a while, we're like, shit, let's go up to Grandy. Let's go up to Digger's Dungeon.
Yeah.
And the kids lost it, man. There's like, they got all the merch. They sold like monster truck Legos. They have a miniaturized version that you can take the kids on. Like, it's a pretty wild place. Now, this was years ago. I don't know if it's like this anymore, but that's what it was at the time. But I did not realize that Dennis Anderson, and you'll be featuring this in an NC Rabbit Hole newsletter. I did not realize that Dennis Anderson tried to cross the Currituck Sound in the monster truck.
Oh, he didn't try.
He did.
He did it.
How?
They lightened it up.
Okay.
They put a different engine in it. Apparently, they did an oil change in the middle of the sound. But they were having it's like the Whalebone Club or the Whalehead Club, whatever it is on the Corolla side of the banks.
Yes.
And it's on the sound, and they were having like, this is like 94. So this happened 30 years ago on July 4th.
Okay.
On this very day tomorrow, 30 years ago.
Oh man, what's more American than the monster truck trying to cross some water, man?
So I don't know why exactly they did it. They were just like, hey, like he had just kind of moved. He was in Kill Devil Hills. I think he just moved over to Grandy. There's more space over.
There's way more space.
Way more space.
Way more space.
So, and he was starting to come into his own, and people were really getting into monster trucks, and especially Gravedigger. And they were like, hey, they were having this festival for the 4th. And like, well, we should have Gravedigger there. And somebody along the way goes, what if he just drives across the water? And they were like, we'll just do it. And so. And the weird thing, this is like one of these things where now they have it at I talked to Dennis very briefly about this, and it's like they have it like you can watch a video of this happening if you go to Digger's Dungeon.
Yeah.
There's very little of it like online. It just got memory hold for some reason.
Yeah.
But it's like you can look at these pictures of like Gravedigger with like a surfboard strapped to the top and like floating on these giant tires. And there's like boats all around him, and the people on the boats like, yeah, hell yeah, brother. And they're just watching him go. It took like 7 hours. So he was in there for 7 hours.
No.
And he drove. Basically, he went to a boat ramp, and I wouldn't have, like, I would kill to have seen the dude who rolled up in his boat to go catch some fish that day. And he looks over, and like coming down the boat ramp is just Gravedigger. Going, like, they just drove in from a boat ramp, went right in the water, and he went across. And it's like the most legendary thing that like I had never heard of. I think Sam Walker out there was like I would do something.
For those who don't know Sam, he's kind of like an OBX legend. You can follow him on social media. If you want to know what's going on in the Outer Banks, he's got it covered.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And so Sam is like, he always like has this thing where he can, whatever I say, there's some crazy Outer Banks thing that is crazier than whatever I have just said to him. And so he was like, I did a thing about like why Southern homes don't tend to have basements. And it's just kind of a little bit complicated story, but like, Sam gets in my mentions, or he says something to me. He's like, "Yeah, there's somebody tried to dig a basement in the Outer Banks one time." And he's like,
yes.
He's like, "How'd that go?" He's like, "Not well,
not great."
too well.
Hey, let's dig into a shifting mass of sand.
Yeah,
cool.
Let's put a basement in there.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do when the water comes in? Like, we'll figure it out. How badass would we have a basement in the Outer Banks?
Kind of like putting some different tires in a different engine, making it lighter. And let's see if we can get across.
I mean, everything. I feel like everything in the Outer Banks is based on a dare, and it's like I bet you
called Dare County.
There it is. It's like it truly. I'm sorry. It truly is Dare County.
On that note, we'll close on that. All right, man. Happy 4th. Don't do anything dumb like try to get a monster truck across the Currituck Sound.
I gotta relive it.
Or replicate Action Park in your backyard.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
I won't.
Don't do it, man.
I'll stay safe.
NC Rabbit Holes, the newsletter. I highly recommend you check it out. Always something fun. Jeremy Markovich. Thanks, man.
Thank you.